I'm going to give a case study of Frank Gehry, very famous architect. This Bilbao that he built, changed the city. In 10 years, there were like 1 million people came by, and the whole city got changed. This is the latest apartment condo he designed in New York. It's an amazing building. It's a museum. I think it's actually no, it's a different museum. This is a sculpture fish, sculptured in Barcelona, another fish. Disney Concert Hall in LA. If you happen to go to LA, please stop by. Wonderful building. Experience Music Project, Seattle. Case Western, Weatherhead Building. IAC headquarters in New York. You know, this is an interesting building because the glasses are curved and bended. So Frank Gehry was talking that, you know, I want bended glass. And the contractor said, there is no bended glass, we cannot bend it. And then he happened to be driving, you know, in a car, and the windshields are all bended, right? He said, these guys know how to bend glass, why can't you? Oh, because they are not in construction. We're in construction, we don't do that. All right, then you're fired. We're going to talk to these guys who make windshield. So they did it. And then they were putting these glasses on the wall. And Frank Gehry said, I don't want any metal. It's like Steve Jobs talking about this Apple store, right? He didn't want, you know, he wanted big panels and so on. So Frank Gehry said, I don't want any metal stuff, any nails, anything. So it's all glued. 3M. Actually, it came from 3M. The only part of the building that is now warranted is glue. They never done this before. They said, I don't know whether it'll pop out. So you know, some parts of the windows actually were manually pressed to bend it, and then they glued it, and then they, you know. So anyway, so this is a crazy person. This is how it all begins. This is just a sketch. He talks to the customer, client, and gets an idea, and then in his mind, a vision comes in, and he calls it dream image. And then he expressed the dream image in his sketch. This is what he said. You get a glimpse in your mind of a building. Once I understand the scale and the program, it's all mixed in my memory box. Then I can fantasize the building. I do sketches and I do models. They are all part of it. They're all informing me and informing my fantasy, and I respond to them intuitively in search of realization of the dream image that you can't quite put your finger on. But the dream image is ephemeral. So he has like this. So in Christian term, this is glimpse of God's glory. One perfect business. Right? Now this is his way of expressing what he's doing. When I work with client, I see a perfect building in my mind. That's what he's saying. Right? It's not prompted by God. He's not a Christian. But the process is the same. There's a drivenness or the desire to create something better. Something that the world has never seen before. And you all are endowed by God's creativity. Steve Jobs, if you read that book, Yo-Yo was invited to his house. And Yo-Yo brought his Stradivarius cello and then played Bach suite. And Steve Jobs heard, and it's in the book, he said, you just made most compelling, persuasive argument about the existence of God to me in my whole life. Because no human can create such a beautiful thing. If God is not there, then such a music cannot exist. Right? When we show the glimpse of God's power, even sinful person like Steve Jobs is moved. Yo-Yo is not a Christian, he's Buddhist. God is doing all sorts of crazy things by using people who do not believe Him. Because He transcends all humanity. He's all-powerful. And God is using someone like Frank Gehry and teaching us that there's something that you all should learn about doing business. And this goes like this. You should be driven by dream. And the dream is from my kingdom. You can see the glimpse of this perfect building. And he said, this is what makes you to be in the business. He was asking us, we were interviewing him. He said, that's just like, you guys in the business. You have this image of perfect business. Isn't it why you're in the business? Well, I don't know. What was really interesting was that he draws these sketches throughout the construction. Even when the building is going up, he's doing it. So he said, well, let me get to the point. So it's a response to the customer. He's not doing it just like in his craziness, right? So I could have come to Weatherhead School and said, and I have the power for the most part to do it. You build the way I want to, or forget it, right? And I could have built an incredible sculpture that had nothing to do with the faculty and students. There are many buildings that don't function. Some architects sell buildings that are irrational, irrelevant about how people use a building. That doesn't happen to me. I do listen. I compromise, and I compromise here. I spend the time listening to people on campus. I worry about the neighbor. You may think I did. I didn't. I did not think I did. But I spent a lot of time worrying about the law school. Law school was right next to the business school, and law school dean complained that when the business school building goes up, his window will be blocked and will be on the shadow forever. And then Frank Gehry actually listened and created a sculpture, the shape so that the law school dean's office would not get shadow from. This is incredible, right? So I think the word compromise is not so pure. I'm very happy with the building, etc., etc. And so those ideas are in my memory, and just go on. So what he says here is that when he's in the building business, so I think this actually is. Those ideas are in my memory, the dream image, and you cannot get rid of it. But how do you take the dream image into reality over a period of 2 to 3 years, which is a normal process time for building? How do you take it to reality without losing the character that this image has? This is an ephemeral idea. It's a search, a constant search. It's like you are in a foggy city and trying to find something. It's like you are not so sure where you are going, but you have this image. You can kind of draw, you can kind of model, but you can't exactly draw it, you can't exactly model it. And you are always falling short. This is his confession. When I heard it, it's like incredible, like goosebumps. He's saying this, like you always fall short. And then I said, why? Because we are all sinners. We are living in a fallen world. This world without God's redemption cannot be made perfect. And that's why the business world always, no matter how hard we try, until that day, it's always going to be fall short. Right? So everything you do always falls short of that image. This is his confession after a long, successful career. It says, in fact, you are never going to get that image perfectly. He's almost like citing C.S. Lewis. In his mind, there's a perfect building for this site. He's not talking about general perfect building. He said, there is a perfect building for that particular client, for that particular site. My job is searching for it and find it and translate it and building it. And each time I do it, I fall short of it and I'm frustrated. That's what he was confessing to us. You make a model, you look at it and say, no, that's not it. But then you have a little bit of this and you make one and you aggregate the pieces and the parts and you evolve to a final model. But then he said, the most frustrating time is when the building is done. Because you know there's nothing you can do about it. And then he said, he was talking about Express Media Project. He said, you cannot explain it to the owner who just spent millions of dollars. Said, you are so depressed because you're just like, oh my God, it's such an ugly building. Everywhere you look. And he said, it's not ugly in a pure sense. It's ugly compared to what I saw. This incredible building that I saw in my mind. And this is what I got. Right? This gap. To me, it's what Christian business people should have. God has given you this incredible image in your mind. Perfect customer, perfect organization, perfect product. And that's what we should all be driven toward. And everywhere you see this is everything is fallen short. It's Romans, right? You know, we all think we fall short of God's glory. No matter what we do, we cannot make it perfect. So what we do, we ask God's help, His grace in what we do, so that His redemptive power would show up in our work. So that when we do our best as God's children, His world will be revealed. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to skip through the detailed part. Then I'm going to hear. So this is what he said. When the building is built, by then you already have dreamed this image way down the line, especially when you start seeing it going up from the ground. You see all the things that you could have done, would have done, and should have done. That's why the first encounter with the finished building is always disappointing. It is very hard to explain to the client. They just paid a lot of money to do the job, and you come in and you're disappointed, and you don't know what to make of that. So I keep trying not to tell people that I'm disappointed because they don't quite understand this dream image thing. It's just that you are suffering from a rude awakening, that your thing is not as good as you thought it would be. That's how you grow to the next project. Right? So this is like the image of manager. That's what managers do. We try our best, right? But still, we're not perfect. We are not God. So we see, we try with God's grace. We are grateful for what we have, but we move on to the next one. But what we have is not perfect in God's standard. So how shall we live as Christians? Participate in God's creative, redemptive work with ideas and word. But the question is, how do we do that? We should serve with excellence. Daniel chapter 19:20. Daniel and his friends were 10 times better than others. You need to be all 10 times better than your peers. What does that 10 times better mean? It's an order of magnitude. 10 times means you have one more zero. In Korean it means 클래스가 다르다. 격이 다르다. 명품. Three problems that we have when we talk about excellence. First one is that in church, often being excellent is an opposite of being spiritual. We need to change that. You can be both excellent and spiritual. We need to change our mindset. Second, excellence against whom? We often think in the world, we need to redeem the world excellence. Because excellence is like Olympics. Who gets the gold medal? But in God's perspective, it is not. It is about defining normal distribution from your own attempts. If you do it 100 times, something, right? If you play golf, 100 times you hit the ball, this is where it happens, right? Now what God wants us to do, the excellence, means that we always hit that 9.05 zone, that tail end. Why? Matthew, parable of talents. Now what is interesting there, the servant who got 2 talents and 5 talents gave 100% back. To me, that is very important keyword. 100% that God has given, and I gave back 100%. That's the sign of excellence. It's not comparing, oh, you have 2 and you have 5, you're more excellent. No, God's excellence is about what is your potential and how much you actually use it. 100%. I use 100% of my time going back. I'm hitting that at normal zone, right? In normal distribution, I'm hitting that zone. That's excellence in God. And the third excellence is not by effort, as I talked about. It's but by grace. So that's the first part. What is manager? What do we do as a manager? We talked about the case study of Frank Gehry really captures the idea of managers who should strive to realize the glimpse of God's kingdom that we all see. Now, of course, if you have no relationship with God, and that means, or you do not have the time with God to see the glimpse of God's kingdom in your own work, then you don't have anything to show to begin with. And then what you do is you just try really, really hard to make something better than other people. Then you're not any different from any other people. But if you truly reflect your Christian faith in your work, that means that your idea begins from God. Then that doesn't mean that God shows up in your dream and say, Youngjin, design this phone yourself, do X, right? It's not what I'm talking about, right? Because it is actually grounded in your own real world, your work, your business. And God is going to give you an insight. When you have the desire that you want to see God's kingdom revealed at your store, at your work, at your department, at your project team, little things you do, if you truly honor God and ask God's help to reveal His kingdom, glory of His kingdom, there, God is going to give you ideas. And your job is translated and implemented in that. And doing it in an excellent way. Now, there are other principles that we need to think about, right? From a management standpoint, like we serve with humility, etc. We hear about those all the time, so I didn't talk about those. But that's what managers are about. So anyway, so we should take questions. I don't know how am I doing with time.
Let's take a couple of questions.
Yeah.
I have a question that you said everybody makes mistakes, and even though we design some good artificial things, some people use it in a good way and some people use it in a wrong way. And I also believe that we can make something that is almost as perfect as God's design and dream. But what will be our responsibility for the products that we make, but it is used in the wrong way?
Right.
Should we have to what do we have to prepare for that, and what our attitude should be?
That's a very good question. So I teach design in the business school, and I ask students at the beginning of the semester to bring examples of good design. And one semester, a student said Uzi, sub-automatic machine gun, is an example of good design. And I said, how can a thing that kills other people can be ever good? He said, well, it does what it's supposed to do really well. And it's very efficient and it doesn't break. It's easy to maintain. Blah 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 blah. So we had a really, really interesting discussion in the classroom. Yours is even more challenging, right? So it's not even designed to do wrong things to do well, but actually you designed it in a very good intention, but then people always, and that happens all the time, right? One of the things, principle of technology in human artifact is that two principles, actually. One is you never get what you intended. It's almost guaranteed, right? It's not a perfect world. It's a fallen world. So even if you, as a faithful designer, you thought about all the things that you designed it, and you want to change, and I can guarantee you that the desired outcome is not going to take place 100% the way you design. So that's rule number one, principle number one. Principle number two is that, however, something is going to happen. And that something is not likely what you actually intended. Okay, so what does that mean from our standpoint and as a manager? Well, there are two things I think we need to think about. One is we want to think as broadly as possible, right? So we're going to talk a little bit about this later about innovation. We do not focus on my thing and user. We think about entire context and try our best to anticipate what might be what we call unintended consequences. And also there are tools that help us to think about ahead of time about negative and positive feedback loop from the things that we design. So we can actually prepare for potential negative consequences. That's one idea. The second idea is that we always have to learn and then be humble and then respond to those unintended consequences, right? You cannot always assume that you're right and they're wrong. There's nothing I can do about it, right? You do learn. A good example is the navigation system with the real-time traffic information. Do you know if the penetration of the product hits 35%, traffic information actually becomes useless? Because everybody is guided toward where the no traffic is, and then it'll create traffic. So that's an intention, very good, well-intended product. But when it becomes very successful, then it's actually going to negate its intention, right? It's not intended by you, like, I didn't know that many people would buy my product, and therefore it is no longer usable. So what am I going to do? So does that answer your question? It's a very tough question, and pray.
I'm sorry, we'll take one more question because many of you want to go to the restroom. So one more question, we'll move on. Yes.
I need some discussion about your idea. I think your assumption that comfortable is always better.
Comfortable.
Comfortable is always better. Better ideas. So I love comfortable. I love technologies. I'm very comfortable by this iPad, but I'm very uncomfortable when I see someone cannot get an iPad. So what is the perfect idea, and what is?
I'm not sure where you got the idea about being comfortable is the best, because being comfortable in certain contexts could be good, but being comfortable in other contexts may not be good, right? And I had this discussion with my colleague when iPhone or iPad, I don't know which one, came out. At any time when Steve Jobs was alive, whenever there's a new product announcement, the internet is just like completely filled with stories about iPad and iPod and so on. Then we said, how many kids in Africa would be saved from hunger by iPhone and iPad? Why are we so all obsessed with these things that just make us more comfortable? Why can't we think of other ways of using technology to do something that is more meaningful? Not that anything wrong with having iPhone and iPad and doing things better and more comfortable. Sure, those are good, noble causes. There's a for hackers, for those who are on Twitter, there's a hashtag, first world problem. People complain about things like, oh, my iPad cannot remember my password. Hashtag first world problem. People say, these are like really not a problem. It's just, we're complaining, whining. You know, compared to the third world problem, where people actually die, you know. One of the things we teach in business school is uncovering hidden needs. My colleague who studied the emerging market, bottom of the pyramid, he's an Indian guy, and he worked with Prahalad for bottom of the pyramid economy. And he and I talked quite a bit, and he came to one of my conferences and talked about the role of design for emerging market. And first thing he said is that, you know, you guys spend enormous amount of time discovering hidden needs. When you go to third world, there is no hidden needs. The needs are screaming loud and clear. People don't eat, people don't have houses, people don't have clothes to wear. What do you mean, hidden needs? It's so obvious. The whole assumption that designers need to discover unmet needs hidden is so first world, right? That's not what we're talking about, right? So I think what we need to think about is that this assumption that, you know, the perfect thing is, of course, it's a good thing, and the good thing is more comfortable, better, and luxurious, more expensive. I think that is very biased view, and then I don't think that's. You're actually asking me, you know, why don't we do more of this, right? So I think I absolutely agree with you, so we need to. If I use term, you know, imply comfort and more luxurious, or you know, these kind of things and toys, as a way of explaining perfect world, I think then I misspoke. That's not what I meant. You know.